Appreciate all the witnesses being here today. Mr. Patel, how much market share did you say you have in the United States? How many $1 million do you spend?
We spend $850 million. So.
Are any of those clients big pharma? Drug companies?
No, sir.
None at all?
We spend our advertising on conventional media channels.
But I mean, when you're buying ads, are you placing ads for big pharma, for pharmaceutical companies, or do you just?
No, sir.
Okay. Ben, I got a quick question for you. We've heard a lot today about some experiences with GARM and the way they've treated certain conservative medias, or at least what we appear to be a mistreatment of certain conservative medias. What about, how have those organizations like, say, Global Disinformation Index and NewsGuard, how have they impacted you as a business owner?
Well, GARM and other organizations like it have worked in conjunction with GDI and NewsGuard to set standards. And again, those standards are purportedly objective. In practice, they rarely are. And so NewsGuard, for example, has penalized us openly for being a conservative site. And when we mention that we are actually honest about our biases, what they say is, well, that means you're not objective, as opposed to other outlets which claim to be objective and actually are biased toward the left, for example. So when these standards are set, this is part of the problem that I would hope that Congress would help uncover. The lack of transparency in the standards is actually a weapon that's used against one side of the political aisle. And I keep asking the question over and over and over again, can NewsGuard name a major right-wing outlet or conservative outlet that it deems brand safe? Can GARM do the same? Because I certainly have seen no evidence that they have deemed, say, the New York Times or CNN brand unsafe in the same way that they would for conservative outlets.
So basically, you think liberal organizations are not being treated the same? I mean,
well, they're being whitelisted, and I think that, well, it's clear that it is true that the amount of money that's being spent in the ad market in news is declining. That does not mean that it is declining proportionately based on politics. That is not the case. A huge percentage of those ad dollars are still going to purportedly objective or left-wing outlets, and virtually none are going to right-wing outlets.
And in referencing Joe Rogan, he's been mentioned a couple times today, and I think when he said on his podcast that young males probably didn't need to vaccinate, I'd imagine that did impact a lot of the big pharma companies that do a lot of advertising. Do you see a scenario, and that's what I was trying to get at with Mr. Patel, do you see a scenario where the advertisers come to, say, a Spotify or whoever's buying bulk advertising for that certain group and say, hey, this guy may hurt our market share, and could y'all quieten his voice a little?
Again, I've only skimmed the report, but I believe there are explicit instances in the report in which GARM actually attempted to suppress particular messages on social media that were damaging to its product, meaning videos that, for example, criticized particular products, did a bad product review, and they suggested perhaps these videos were violative of GARM standards.
Mr. Juhl, I got a quick question here. One of your employees, John Montgomery, the Executive Vice President of Global Brand Safety, wrote a letter to the leader of GARM, Mr. Rakowitz, comparing the Daily Wire and Breitbart. He wrote, quote, as much as we hated their misguided opinion, as much as we hated their ideology and expletive, we couldn't really justify blocking them for the misguided opinions. What ideology of Daily Wire and Breitbart does your company hate exactly?
It's not an ideology that they're talking about, and John Montgomery no longer works at the company. Really what we're trying to do is—
He said we hated their ideology in the quote. So what do you think, if he wasn't talking about ideology, what did he mean exactly?
I think that's an individual viewpoint that he was espousing. It's not the firm's decision. It's not what Group M's position is. And I can't speak for GARM directly.
So, Ben, do you think that Mr. Juhl's answering that correctly, that that's not their ideology, that's just one former employee's ideology?
I mean, that letter does use the first person plural, as in we, as opposed to I. So the idea that he was speaking solely on his own behalf, while also, I believe in that email, signing with his corporate title at the bottom of the email, it sort of beggars belief that this is non-representative of the generalized worldview of the company of which he was an employee and in which capacity he was speaking.
Ben, I got 15 seconds. What is hate speech?
This happens to be the biggest problem with the label hate speech, that it has no specific definition, and we've seen it weaponized by some people on the other side of the aisle today to sort of broadly cover everything from things that we would all agree are disgusting and terrible to things that are essentially mainstream worldviews, like, for example, the idea that biological men and biological women are separate categories. These have all been lumped together, and this is the danger in setting up what are purportedly objective, pseudo-objective standards that are far too broad and subjectively applied.
I love how one of the members of the committee a while ago said she is a woman. You know,